was actually born in Sydney, born in 1944 in Sydney. My dad's an Adelaide boy, my mum was a Sydney girl. Dad was very long serving in the Navy, but I moved here when I was 2, so I'm effectively Adelaidean. And my intention was to be an architect, and I was just prior to going into university to do that. And my father, who was a very high-level public servant, decided he had enough of politicians and public service, wanted his own business, so he got a service station, and I got coerced to drop out of studies and go into the mechanical game. It was on corner Woodville and Findon Road, opposite the QEH. It's no longer there. It was a brand new station. He took it on, we were the first lessees in there. I would have been probably 18 odd years. As far as the appearance of service stations compared to today, far less cluttered. Didn't rely on all sorts of extraneous objects to make money out of. It just purely pumped petrol and the full service type thing of pumping up tyres, etc., etc. But as I said, much less cluttered, much better flow through of traffic. Workshops, pretty limited in those days, very basic. Well, my father decided he was the clerical type, and he would run the whole shooting match, but I would run the workshop, and therefore I began an apprenticeship. And did the full, actually it was a 4-year apprenticeship, but I did it in 3 years. I was part of the very first trial in this country of an accelerated apprenticeship, and I did the 4 years in 3. They took it upon, so in those days, trade school was done at Frome Road in the city here, and it was much different than today. You would do 1 day a week or a fortnight and 2 nights a week in your own time and all that sort of thing, which I think was a good system because it gave some ownership and some importance to it. You're giving up your own time as opposed to the boss just paying you to laze around all the time. So, but anyway, that's gone now, gone by the by. They go in blocks, all in the employer's time. But yeah, I did that course. They took it upon themselves for the first time ever to grade out the incoming apprentices according to their prior education, because there were kids in my intake that hadn't finished primary school, believe it or not. And yet here I was on the verge of going to university, so they recognised, well, there's going to be different learning curves here. They graded it out and separated a class out, including myself, to do an accelerated course, which, to be quite honest, that was a breeze, absolute breeze. I got, from memory, 45 credits out of 48 subjects. I only missed the others by a fraction, and that was an accelerated timing. So, but there was a lot less to learn than nowadays. It's overwhelming what they need to be knowing now. Cars were, as they are today for me, many and varied. The difference is much more simplistic, much more basic or agricultural, as I'd refer to them. So during an apprenticeship, there's still a lot to learn, but it wasn't as overwhelmingly technical as it is nowadays. So it was relatively easy to get on top of it fairly early. They required more frequent attention but lesser amounts of work. That was the nature of it. If you go back even historically, prior to me, there was some what appear to be absurd things, like you would regularly take a cylinder head off and decarbonise or decoke it. Well, that hasn't been around since button-up boots, but that was a scheduled service. Or take mufflers off and clean them out, which has all gone by the by. And it's to do with the design of the car and fuels and oils and stuff like that, changes in those areas. But as I said, there were a totally different type of work, style of work, much more simplistic. There were also far lesser number of vehicles or makes on the road. I don't know what there was back then, but I mean currently it's something like 66 or 67 brands on our roads here. You multiply that up by how many models within each of those brands, and multiply that up by how many options and extras people can have fitted, which changes around everything you're working with, and it's just enormous. Within the service station, my father signed the lease for a 3-year period. He got very disenchanted because in those days there was an explosion of service stations being built. And all the projected traffic flows and projected throughput you would have got strangled at every which way. You look up this road, that road, the other road, and there's a new station, new station, new station. We had, I think, 5 built within half a kilometre of us in that first 3 years. He got disenchanted with that, so we terminated the lease at the end of 3. We then built a private workshop at Underdale in those days, and just shifted across to there. No petrol, no nothing like that, just pure workshop. And that's the current one, Western Auto Repairs. That was in 1966, we started that. I'm still running that business. I'm in the 3rd premises that that business has been in now. I didn't do any official courses re-management, not of any magnitude. A lot of it washed off from observations, close-hand observations of my father. As I said, he was very high-level public servant. Matter of fact, he had a chauffeur-driven car, bring him home every night. He put in place the entire Maralinga project for the atom bomb blasts. He was in charge of a lot of the supply stuff for the Ikara missile project. He had ASIO clearance to all military installations in Australia, so fairly high level and quite a lot of knowledge. So a lot of what I picked up was sort of first-hand working with him. And obviously you attend various small unofficial courses, if you like, via accountancy firms or MTA and things like that, and you just keep adding it to it and putting it into practice, and being studious as I am, you keep looking for more to add to it. There's a lot of issues with governance, with health and safety, and that are all put in there for the right reasons, but the way in which they're applied, in my view, gets a bit over the top at times. Maybe it's all right for larger firms with a lot more staff and a lot more resources to manage it, but it's not a scaled thing. You know, if you've got 100 staff and applying yourself to it, if you only got 1 staff, you don't do 1/100th less. You know, proportionally, it's out of kilter. It started off for the right reason, but I think it's a bit too much at the moment. I reckon it's in the order of 30, 32 years, something like that I've been a member, because I've been on this Board of Management for, I think, about the 25 plus years. If you take an interest at a committee level, you finish up getting put forward to be vice chair, as happened to me in a few bodies, which ultimately turns into being chair of that, which ultimately looks for nominations to go to the board. So it's just a natural progression, and all those different areas always, in my view, provide you with knowledge, and I'm always interested in knowledge, and you don't get lots of that knowledge unless you get deeply involved and deal with all those different issues on a day-by-day basis. My involvement really has been from literally grassroots level. It's always like running a workshop and being hands-on in a workshop. What do you see as a need, or what do you see as being surplus to requirements, or what are you crystal ball we'll need in a few years, and how do we handle this, that and the other, that style of thing. Just recently, the environmental scan people who call meeting in all the major cities, at a national level, they go down that track. And it raises a really interesting question, because with such volume of change that's going through motor cars in recent times, for them to say, well, what modules do we have? What will the mechanic need in 4 years' time? And you say, how would I know? I don't even know what the manufacturers are going to be putting out on the road in 4 years' time. But somehow they have to get that right. And they rely on grassroots level to predict and project that and factor it in. Well, we do the same and always have done the same, asking at grassroots level what's wanted, what works, what doesn't work. And it seems to come together. I think it's a smart way. And there was a change made many years back. I recall I was asked to go out to Parafield to look at an aeronautical training module, which seems odd, but there was an instruction that no new courses could come out without the trade's approval. So people like myself or whatever would have to go and say, well, what is it that you're proposing? And, you know, is there some meaningful end result to this? Like, will there be jobs, et cetera, et cetera? And so there are some sensible decisions come out at time. It slowly gets refined over a lot of years to where it's quite a complicated arrangement, but it's working pretty well. It'll be determined, a market always determines a lot of things, but I'm not real optimistic about small operators. I think there are too many odds stacked against them in the things you mentioned and a few others. I think there's a necessity for them to be there. I don't know how they're going to survive financially if they stay exactly as they are. I've mentioned to Paul a thought that I had, that they may be forced to specialise, either in a given make and exclude all others, or a component within all makes or something like that. But whether they can derive sufficient throughput and income, don't know. I think there's a position there for MTA to play as a facilitator of that sort of thing happening. I think they could more easily go into a specialised area if there was a network of referral. If you did it on your own, if you just plucked a given make out and said, that's it, I hang my shingle out and wait for them to come on in, when you think those issues through, if you plucked out, let's say BMW, and you managed to get a number of clients, as soon as he trades his BMW in on a Mercedes-Benz, you have to preclude him. Or if you're doing his car and he's really happy with that, but he wants to bring his wife's Daewoo or something in, no, I don't do them. So what do you do about, how do you handle that? Other than say, well, I don't do Daewoos, but this chap that's on the committee or this other MTA member does, and I'll refer you across, and he's ultimately happy there as well. That's one way of me crystal balling what might be able to enable small operators to survive, but they would need the networking, and hence I think MTA's probably got a role to play in facilitating that. There needs to be a passion. If you're just going to treat it as a job, you won't see the distance, I don't think. That's the first part of it, and how you determine passion within a young person is hard. The other thing that, I mean, I've had a number of apprentices of my own indentured to me for the full period, I think 7 for 4-year periods, plus a heap of GDS apprentices. And the one thing I try to impress on them, as opposed to some other trades, when they finally front up with their certificate after 4 years, I tell them they're now in a position to begin learning. They've actually got the basis to start building worthwhile learning upon. Not like if you were a bricklayer or something like that, here's my certificate, now I don't have to learn another thing in my life. I can relax and just lay bricks forever, and there might be a minor change to something you add to the cement or whatever, but by and large, nothing will change. This game is changing at such a speed that you probably need 10 years in the game to really start to think you're on top of things, and then you have to apply yourself literally daily for all the new stuff that's coming through and the rapid changes and turns it makes. So if you think after 4 years with your certificate, you're in good shape the rest of your life, you're in a position to begin some serious learning, of which you'll find very interesting, as opposed to most learning is fraught with all sorts of problems, you know, irritation, agitation, worry, concern, will I pass this exam? Once you get to that point, you can start approaching learning on the basis of, isn't that interesting, this is fantastic, which inflames your passion even further. And once you're off on down that track, you should be there long term. I saw someone calculated that, like when I did my time, you needed to know 600 pages like the back of your hand. No referral, no instantaneous recall. Currently, it's something like 6,000 pages is a base requirement that you know instantaneously. You don't have to go look things up, you just like your own name. And you need to know where it comes from, where it's going to, because sometimes that history will influence where it goes in the future. And as I mentioned to Paul, you know, one of the issues, like the group that I chair here, They're currently looking at the vehicle inspection type situation. I've been chasing that for 30 years. You couldn't tell you how many hundreds of hours or thousands of hours have gone into preparation, documentation, meeting with ministers, transport ministers of all ilks and all that sort of, to see it, fall over at the last hurdle and never get legs and all that sort of stuff. Now, they come up and say, let's do it this way. And if you can say, or somebody historically can say, yeah, we did it that way twice and it fell over, I think you're flogging a dead horse. If no one's there to say that, they'll go down that track and it'll fall over again 2 more times. And they say, oh, maybe we'll change our tack. And if that historical aspect's lost, well, you keep doomed to repeat the failures of the past, basically. Because change is, by and large, in just about all areas, change is incremental. There are no sudden 180-degree turns where it's all turned on its head and it's totally different. It's incremental, it's bit by bit, and quite often it sneaks up on you and you adjust to it and then you forget that, and that seems to be the norm, but no, it wasn't the norm. Maybe it was better back then because it was done differently or whatever. The current scenario with motor cars, I mean, it is just mind-boggling. There isn't any area that there's not radical stuff. I read a technical article, I was just reading it yesterday. Windscreens. You think that'd be as plain and simple. Are you seeing what's coming up in windscreens in the future crop of cars? All the heads-up display, like the helicopters or the fighter planes. There's no instruments anymore. They're projecting it up on the screen. Don't take your eyes off the road. You can read everything you want on the screen. Self-darkening. No more tinting. They self-darken and they adjust according to the light and stuff like that. No more wipers. They've got special designs there that can break up water droplets so they never get onto the screen. And it goes on and on. There's a two foolscap page article on what will be coming out in windscreens. You think, oh God, I can see that'll be linked in to all sorts of other stuff. And you've got to diagnose. And look, a classic example, I got a memo a couple of years ago, this CAN bus system in the cars. They use it in marine boats for starters, and then they've transferred it into cars. I got a memo that detailed 8 different makes of cars with 8 absolutely unrelated faults, from engine won't start, transmission won't shift gears, cruise control doesn't work, etc, etc, etc. Totally unrelated. Every one of them had the same problem, blown taillight blow. Yeah, so I mean, that's 2 years ago, and we implemented a policy in the shop. Whatever the customer comes in complaining, first thing go around and check if the brake lights work. Of course, you can spend 6 hours diagnosing why the cruise control didn't work and fires a blown globe. And how do you charge the customer? It is just mind-blowing. The interrelationship of all the different components, that's one of the issues about if someone wants to specialise. I don't quite know how they're going to achieve it, because I can remember years back I had to do a tune-up on a BMW, and the guy had just paid $3,000 for a transmission overhaul at one of the most reputable auto trans places, and there was nothing wrong with the trans because it still had the same problem. It was a vacuum problem from the motor because its tune was out of whack. Now, they're a specialist in their field and they really know transmissions inside out, but it's dependent on, in those cases, a vacuum signal from the motor. But nowadays it'll be electronic signals, and so how far out from that speciality do they take their knowledge and their data and scanners and all the rest of the stuff? It's just getting a nightmare. Even on racetrack, I worked 2 or 3 years on the racetrack on Lotus with a privateer, and another 2 or 3 years mostly driving, but also fixing a car in Australian Rally Championship stuff. And the race car stuff in those days isn't a patch on the complexity in the current average garden variety vehicle. Not a patch.